You just got pulled over, and the officer walks up to your window. Your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and you want to say something, anything, to make this interaction go smoothly. But here's the terrifying truth. There are 5 specific words that, if you say them to a police officer during a traffic stop, will almost guarantee that they search your vehicle. And I'm about to tell you exactly what those words are and why they trigger an immediate red flag in every cop's mind. But before we dive into this critical information, do me one massive favor right now. Hit that subscribe button immediately. Why am I asking this up front? Because 90% of people who watch videos like this never subscribe, and then they miss the follow-up content that could literally keep them out of handcuffs. The information I'm sharing today isn't taught in driver's ed. It's not in any handbook. And most lawyers won't tell you this until you're already sitting in a jail cell wondering what went wrong. So click that button right now, because what you're about to learn could be the difference between driving away with a warning and spending the night in county lockup. Here's what most people don't understand about police psychology during traffic stops. Officers are trained to listen for specific verbal cues that indicate deception, nervousness, or potential criminal activity. These aren't random hunches or gut feelings. These are documented, researched psychological triggers that law enforcement agencies across the country teach their officers to recognize. When you say certain words, you're essentially waving a red flag and telling the officer that there's something worth investigating in your vehicle. The crazy part is that most of these words seem completely innocent. In fact, you've probably said at least 3 of them during previous traffic stops without realizing you were giving the officer legal justification to tear your car apart. Let me start with the most dangerous word you can possibly say during a traffic stop, and this one shocks everyone when they hear it. The word is just. That's right, the simple word just is like ringing a dinner bell for police officers who want to search your vehicle. Here's why this works against you. When people lie or try to minimize something, they instinctively use the word just to make whatever they're hiding seem smaller or less significant. For example, if an officer asks where you're coming from and you say, "I was just at my friend's house," that word just immediately tells the officer that you're trying to downplay something. The psychological training teaches cops that honest people don't feel the need to minimize their actions. If you were simply at your friend's house, you would say, "I was at my friend's house." The word just suggests you were doing something else there, something you don't want the officer to know about. The same principle applies to other scenarios. If an officer asks, "What's in your trunk?" and you respond with, "It's just some gym clothes," you've just given him probable cause to investigate further. Why? Because the word just implies there might be something else in there that you're not mentioning. An innocent person would simply say, "There are some gym clothes in there." The word just creates doubt in the officer's mind, and doubt leads to searches. I've seen this happen dozens of times. Good people, with nothing illegal in their vehicles, get searched because they use this one word incorrectly. And here's the kicker. Once you say just, anything else you try to explain afterwards sounds like you're covering up or making excuses. The second word that guarantees a search might surprise you even more. It's the word nothing. When an officer asks, "Do you have anything illegal in the vehicle?" and you respond with, "No, nothing," you've just failed what police call the truth test. Here's the psychology behind this. Truthful people typically respond to direct questions with direct answers. If you have nothing illegal in your car, the natural response is simply no. When you add nothing to your answer, it suggests you're being overly emphatic, which is a classic sign of deception according to police training manuals. But here's where it gets even trickier. The word nothing becomes especially problematic when officers ask broader questions. If they ask, "Is there anything I should know about?" and you respond with, "No, nothing," you're essentially telling them that you've considered whether there's something they should know about and you've decided to hide it. The word nothing implies a mental inventory was taken, which means there was something to inventory. Honest people don't take mental inventories of potential problems because they genuinely have nothing to worry about. Now, the third word is one that people think makes them sound cooperative and helpful, but it actually does the opposite. The word is maybe. This word destroys your credibility instantly because it suggests uncertainty about your own actions. If an officer asks, "Have you been drinking tonight?" and you answer, "Maybe I had 1 beer," you've just admitted to drinking and driving while simultaneously suggesting you might be lying about the amount. The word maybe tells the officer that you're either lying or that your judgment is so impaired you can't remember what you've consumed. The same problem occurs with other questions. If they ask, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" and you say, "Maybe I was going a little fast," you're admitting guilt while suggesting you were aware of breaking the law but chose to do it anyway. Or worse, it suggests you were doing multiple things wrong and you're not sure which one they caught you for. Police officers are trained to recognize that maybe responses indicate consciousness of guilt, which is a legal standard that can justify further investigation and searches. Quick question before we continue, are you subscribed yet? If not, you're missing out on information that could keep you out of legal trouble. Hit that button now because the next 2 words I'm about to reveal are the ones that catch even experienced drivers off guard. The fourth word that triggers automatic searches is okay. but specifically when it's used as a question. Here's what I mean. When an officer makes a statement like, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," and you respond with, "Okay," with that questioning tone, you've just indicated to the officer that you're surprised by the request. This suggests to them that you have something in the vehicle you don't want them to discover. Innocent people might not like being asked to step out of their car, but they're not surprised by the request because they have nothing to hide. The questioning "okay" becomes even more problematic when officers make statements about what they're going to do next. If they say, "I need to take a look in your vehicle," and you respond, "Okay," you're essentially asking them why they need to look, which tells them you have something you're worried about them finding. The correct response if you want to avoid a search is, "I do not consent to any searches." But saying "okay" with that questioning inflection is like asking them to dig deeper. This extends to other interactions as well. If an officer says, "Can you tell me where you're headed tonight?" and you respond, "Okay," instead of just answering the question, it suggests you're stalling for time to come up with a story. Police are trained to recognize stalling tactics because liars need time to construct believable lies, while truthful people can answer immediately. The fifth and final word that guarantees a vehicle search is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all. It's the word "honestly." When people start sentences with "honestly" or "to be honest," they're telling the officer that everything they said before that point was potentially dishonest. Think about it. If someone says, "Honestly, I was just coming home from work," the implication is that their previous statements may not have been honest. Why would an honest person need to emphasize their honesty unless they had previously been dishonest? Police officers are specifically trained to listen for these verbal cues because research shows that deceptive people unconsciously try to convince others of their truthfulness by emphasizing it. When you say "honestly," you're essentially admitting that you have the capacity for dishonesty in this situation, which immediately puts the officer on high alert. Here's where this gets really dangerous. The word "honestly" often comes up when people are trying to explain away something suspicious. For example, if an officer notices you seem nervous and asks about it, and you respond with, "Honestly, I'm just nervous because I've never been pulled over before," you've just told them that you might not have been honest about your driving record or that you're nervous for reasons beyond the normal stress of a traffic stop. Now, let me explain why these 5 words are so dangerous from a legal perspective. When police officers hear these verbal cues, they don't need to prove that you're actually lying or hiding something. They just need reasonable suspicion to extend the traffic stop and investigate further. Reasonable suspicion is a much lower legal standard than probable cause. It means the officer has specific facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe criminal activity might be occurring. Your verbal responses can provide those specific facts. If you use words that police training identifies as deceptive indicators, that becomes part of their reasonable suspicion. They can then extend the traffic stop to investigate further, which might include asking more questions, calling for backup, or bringing in drug dogs. And here's the crucial part. Once they have reasonable suspicion based on your verbal responses, they can legally search your vehicle if they develop probable cause during their investigation. The scary reality is that these searches often lead to additional charges even when people aren't doing anything wrong. Maybe they find an old prescription bottle with someone else's name on it. Maybe they discover a pocket knife that violates local weapons ordinances. Maybe they find something that belonged to a friend who borrowed the car last week. Suddenly, you're facing charges for things you didn't even know were in your vehicle, all because you said the wrong word during what should have been a routine traffic stop. Here's what you should say instead. When officers ask questions during traffic stops, keep your responses simple, direct, and brief. Don't elaborate, don't explain, and definitely don't use these 5 trigger words. If they ask where you're coming from, say, "I was at my friend's house," not "I was just at my friend's house." If they ask if you have anything illegal in the vehicle, say no, not "no, nothing." If they ask if you've been drinking, say no if you haven't, or "I had 1 beer an hour ago" if you did. Don't say "maybe I had 1 beer" or "honestly, I had 1 beer." The key is to be truthful without using language that police are trained to interpret as deceptive. Remember, you're not trying to outsmart the officer or hide anything. You're simply communicating in a way that doesn't trigger their investigative instincts unnecessarily. But here's the most important thing you need to understand. Even if you avoid these 5 words, officers can still ask to search your vehicle. The difference is that without verbal cues suggesting deception, they'll have a much harder time justifying the search legally. If they ask for consent to search, you should clearly and politely say, "I do not consent to any searches." This doesn't guarantee they won't search anyway, but it protects your constitutional rights and gives your attorney something to work with if the case goes to court. Now, I want to address something that a lot of people worry about. Won't refusing a search or being careful about my words make me look guilty? Here's the truth. Police officers search vehicles all the time. They're not doing it because they think you look guilty. They're doing it because they're trained to look for opportunities to search, and verbal cues give them legal justification to do so. Being mindful of your language isn't about appearing innocent or guilty. It's about not giving them unnecessary legal ammunition to use against you. Remember, this is educational information, not legal advice. Laws vary by state and individual circumstances matter. Always consult with a qualified attorney for specific legal guidance. But understanding these psychological triggers can help you navigate traffic stops more effectively and protect your constitutional rights. Hey, if you found this information valuable, here's what I need you to do. First, subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. Second, share this video with anyone you know who drives. This information isn't taught anywhere else, and it could save someone you care about from a life-changing legal nightmare. And finally, drop a comment below and let me know if you've ever used any of these 5 words during a traffic stop. Your experience could help other viewers learn from real-world situations. The reality is that traffic stops are high-stress situations where people say things they don't mean to say. But now that you know these 5 trigger words, you can avoid them and significantly reduce your chances of having your vehicle searched. Remember, just nothing, maybe okay, with a questioning tone, and honestly, these 5 words can turn a routine traffic stop into a full-scale investigation. Avoid them, know your rights, and stay safe out there.